Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, I want to begin today, as I did when we considered this measure last year, by saying that I absolutely, fully agree with the bill's stated goals. Local journalism, as we all know, has been hurting. My hometown newspaper, the Los Angeles Times, just announced more than 70 layoffs. And across the country, journalists are striking. The decimation of local news is a disservice to our communities, and I'm deeply concerned, as I believe you are too, about what this means for the future of our country. Now, when the committee marked up the same bill last year, I offered my support at the time in return for a commitment from the sponsors to work together to improve the bill and address the concerns that I had raised. Now, I recognize that the bill was never brought up for a vote on the Senate floor, but here we are today, and the concerns I shared last year still have not been addressed. Instead, we're considering the same bill with the same flaws. So I want to be clear again today as I was last year. This bill, as written, does nothing to guarantee the protection or pay of the journalists and media workers that we're claiming to try to protect. Journalists at dozens of local papers across the nation went on strike to protest the nation's largest news conglomerate, decimating more than 50 newsrooms. For us to ignore them while claiming to be fighting for them is absurd. And here's another significant update. I think this was referenced earlier today. The state legislature in California is actually in the process of considering similar legislation that in many ways is modeled after the measure before us, but as the state bill is crafted, actually addresses the problem by including a provision that requires 70% of the money news publishers would receive to actually go to journalists and other newsroom workers, and not just the profit margins of wealthy hedge fund and private equity owners. Just yesterday, I received a letter from the News Guild representing the Desert Sun, a Gannett-owned newspaper that argued, and I'll quote, "We have serious concerns about the legislation in its current form. It is currently not tied to journalism jobs," end quote. The letter also notes, here's another quote, "News companies have shown a willingness to reward shareholders and executives before providing the news community's need." Another letter I received from the Media Guild of the West also observes that, quote, "We have previously been critical of JCPA's lack of reasonable accountability measures for Wall Street-dominated news publishers, which have repeatedly shown they can't be trusted to put our newsrooms before their boardrooms. We strongly maintain those reservations here," end quote. Mr. Chairman, I ask that both of these letters be entered into the record.
Without objection.
So, colleagues, both sides of the aisle, because I know this measure has bipartisan support. If the workers who routinely deal with these hedge fund and private equity owners are skeptical that any money gained from this bill will actually go to employees, then this committee should be skeptical too. And that's why I filed amendments to address this. I also continue to have concerns about the bill's non-discrimination and non-retaliation provisions that will compel platforms to carry content and pay for content that they fundamentally disagree with. And I worry that the bill will be used to disincentivize efforts to moderate content, including but not limited to election disinformation. And I filed an amendment to try to address this problem as well. Mr. Chairman, I ask that letters on this issue from civil liberties organizations and more than a dozen academics be entered into the record.
Without objection.
And I have other concerns, but the last one I'll raise is that I think the bill both misdiagnoses the problems that led to the collapse of local news as we knew it and sets a startling and undesirable precedent. Hyperlinks are the lifeblood of the internet, and the ability to freely link to content has been a vital democratizing force for access to information, education, and communication. And while the bill does not explicitly say that the covered platforms or their users will have to pay publishers every time someone shares an article or links to it, that appears to me a very likely outcome. And I think we need to fully grapple with what that could mean. Again, Mr. Chair, I fully support the fundamental goal of ensuring that we have more journalists covering more regional and local news. But if the goal of the bill is to help save journalism, then let's actually make it about journalists and journalism. I'm disappointed the bill was scheduled for markup before these issues worked out because we raised them long ago. And I'm disappointed that we couldn't improve the bill before it seems like it's going to be leaving committee today. So I will just share with all of you, I'm going to be a no vote on the bill today, and we'll put a hold on it once it reaches the floor until my concerns are addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Lee, before I recognize